really here with John and Yoko? No doubt about it. I was living a dream, and I was more than just a tiny bit scared that I'd suddenly wake up to find out I was imagining the whole thing. RKO engineer producer Ron Hummel was busy taking out his tape deck and other equipment just as Yoko joined us, introducing herself and seeming very happy to see me, a female, as part of our otherwise all-male interview team. I felt a connection right off the bat, not just because we were both women, but also because I've always been intrigued by her avant-garde approach to art and music, even if I didn't actually understand the meaning of her conceptual art or exactly what she was trying to say with some of her early experimental music. But I was inspired by the way she never backed down, even while becoming a controversial figure blamed by 99.9% of the rock-pop music-loving public for breaking up the Beatles. In other words, I was in awe. And so our pre-interview kicked off with Yoko telling us that John was just finishing up with photographer Annie Leibovitz, but I would be seeing him when he came down shortly. While waiting for Ron to mic her up, I whipped out the silly little mechanical wind-up toy I picked up in San Francisco's Chinatown, a fire-breathing dragon that I thought Sean, their 5-year-old son, would have a lot of fun with. Yoko was sure John himself would absolutely fall in love with it, and she was totally right. When John spotted it later, he immediately grabbed it and wound it up, watching the dragon travel the entire length of the glass coffee tabletop, while the two of them laughed like crazy, both he and Yoko saying how much Sean would enjoy it, that is, if he ever actually gave it to him, rather than keeping it themselves. Another item I brought along with me was my personal copy of Grapefruit, a 1970 edition of Yoko's 1964 conceptual art and poetry book featuring, as it said right under her glowing portrait on the cover, works and drawings by Yoko Ono, and an introduction by John Lennon. I picked up the book years before on the bargain table at Cody's, Berkeley's popular Telegraph Avenue bookstore, never imagining that I'd be sitting with the author herself mere 4 years later, waiting for her former evil husband to join us. Once Ron had Yoko's microphone in place, the two of us gals chatted on tape about the relationship between men and women in society and the pressing need to open up a new dialogue between the sexes. Dave Sholin, the RKO executive, who'd made sure I was included in the interview in the first place and was naturally just as thrilled as I was to be there, joined in, as did Warner Brothers Records' Bert Keane, who'd been instrumental in pulling our whole event together. And so there we were, the four of us plus Yoko, when suddenly there was a knock on the door. As it opened slightly, just a couple of inches, the first thing I saw was John Lennon's trademark round glasses and his nose sticking through the crack. When he opened the door all the way, I turned towards him and in my typical smart-ass fashion, looked right at him and asked him under my breath, "Can't you see we're in the middle of an interview?" He looked at me and laughed out loud. And when Yoko did too, I thought to myself, everything's okay. We're going to have a great time here. John introduced himself to our group and sat down right next to me on the small love seat to join the conversation. My brain began to explode. Me, sitting next to John Lennon. Wow, unfreaking believable. How in the world this could ever happen was totally beyond my comprehension. And as I made my best effort to stay in the moment, I realized that this interview could very well be the milestone event that would not only define the rest of my career, but no doubt my entire life. I had no way of knowing at the time that this was to become John's final interview, mere hours before he was shot and killed just outside the same building later that very evening. While countless books and bios have been published since on the life and times of John Lennon, none of those authors spent that ill-fated day with John and Yoko, nor were any of them confronted later on and literally forced into a conversation like I was with a beyond creepy character who was about to become his assassin. He refused to get out of my way, stepping right in my path as I tried to walk away from the Dakota hours later, while obnoxiously asking me, "Did you talk to him? Did you get his autograph? What'd he say? What'd he say? What'd he say?" Over and over and over. For years, I beat myself up about this, wondering why I didn't realize there was something seriously awful about him, and even more importantly, why I didn't sense that he was at that very moment carrying the gun that he was about to use to murder John Lennon before the night was over. The guilt has been hanging heavily over my head for more than 40 years now. To my mind, this is what makes me the right person to tell her singular story as the half-century anniversary of a tragic event that affected so many lives, including my own, approaches. As a young rock radio reporter, writer, producer, sitting in the Dakota that day with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, I guessed right about the life-altering nature of our interview. But what I couldn't even begin to imagine was that this unparalleled episode would not only dramatically change the course of my life and career, but my psyche as well. To this day, when I mention interviewing John Lennon on the former Beatles' last day on the planet, the response is nearly always the same. Jaws drop, people gasp, and the inevitable question is asked, "When are you going to write your book, Lori?" The answer is now.